When I found this at an antique store, I almost walked right past it. I couldn't even tell what it was supposed to be. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary canvas bag. It's dirty, faded, and the artwork on the front definitely catches your eye. But the more I looked at it, the more questions I had. After bringing it home and digging into its history, I realized this wasn't just another old camping accessory. For a few decades, people all over America and in places like Australia with similar hot, dry climates hung bags like this on the outside of their vehicles. Not inside, outside. And believe it or not, this bag was actually designed to leak. This one is called the Traveler Water Bag. It holds 2 gallons of water, or about 7.5 liters, and right across the front it says, "No soaking necessary, ready for use." At first, that just sounds like advertising, but it turns out those 6 words tell you almost everything that you need to know about why this bag existed. To understand these bags, you almost have to forget what driving is like today. Imagine taking a road trip across Arizona or New Mexico around 1950. The interstate highway system hadn't been built yet. Air conditioning in cars was still uncommon. Many highways crossed hundreds of miles of open country where towns and gas stations could be few and far between. Summer temperatures could easily climb above 100 degrees Fahrenheit or about 38 degrees Celsius. Cold bottled water wasn't waiting for you at every stop, and cars themselves demanded a lot more attention than they do today. One thing I hadn't really considered before researching this, the water wasn't just for the people inside the car, it was for the car itself too. Cooling systems were improving, but overheating was still a common problem. A long climb through the desert, a small coolant leak, or a hot summer day could leave you sitting on the side of the road waiting for your engine to cool down. Having a couple gallons of water with you could make all the difference. So this wasn't just a drinking water bag, it was emergency equipment. These bags were designed to be hung somewhere on the outside of the vehicle, where moving air could pass over the damp canvas. Exactly where they were mounted varied from vehicle to vehicle, but the important part was keeping them out in the airflow. As you drove, air flowed over the damp canvas. That moving air sped up evaporation, and that evaporation naturally cools whatever water is left behind. In other words, the airflow created by driving helped keep the water inside cooler than the surrounding air. Here's the part that surprised me the most. The goal wasn't to stop the bag from leaking. The goal was to make it leak, just enough. A tiny amount of water slowly worked its way through the canvas, creating a thin, damp layer on the outside. As that moisture evaporated, it carried heat away with it. That left the water inside noticeably cooler than the outside temperature. People have been using the same basic principle for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations cooled drinking water using porous clay pots. This bag simply adapted that same principle for the age of the automobile. You might be wondering why I'm not filling this up and demonstrating it. Believe me, I thought about it. But this bag is more than 75 years old, and I don't know what kind of condition the canvas or the printed artwork is really in. The last thing I want to do is damage an original piece of history just to make a better demonstration. Fortunately, I don't have to guess how it worked, because the patent tells us exactly what the inventors were trying to accomplish. The company behind this bag was the H. Wenzel Tent and Duck Company, based in St. Louis, Missouri. The company was founded in 1887, nearly 140 years ago, by German immigrant Hermann Wenzel. They started by making canvas awnings, then wagon covers, then tents, then tarps. By the time automobiles became part of everyday life, Wenzel had already spent decades learning exactly how canvas behaved in the real world. Looking back, it almost seems inevitable that they'd end up making products like this. The Wenzel name is actually still around today, although these classic water bags disappeared many years ago. In 1949, Wenzel received a US patent for improving this design. I love the fact that they weren't trying to invent the canvas water bag, those already existed. They were trying to improve it. Older bags often had to be soaked in water before they worked properly. Some materials could even leave an unpleasant taste or smell in the water. Wenzel's solution wasn't to stop the seepage, it was to control it. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to keep the cooling effect without wasting your water. Suddenly, that slogan on the front, "No soaking necessary," wasn't just clever advertising. It was the invention. The more I researched these bags, the more I realized they weren't just another automotive accessory. They became part of the American road trip. Families on vacation, hunters, campers, truck drivers, ranchers, anyone spending long days in hot, dry country. The bag hanging from the bumper became almost as recognizable as the roadside gas station. It represented a time where staying cool took a little planning. There is one part of this bag that is difficult to ignore: the artwork. Like many products from the first half of the 20th century, companies often used romanticized images of Native Americans to market their products associated with the American West. Today, many people understandably view imagery like this differently than they did decades ago. Whether you like it or not, it's part of this object's history, and it tells us something about the culture and advertising of the time. So, after all of this, did they actually work? From just about everything that I've found, the answer is yes. Under the right conditions, these bags could keep water noticeably cooler than the surrounding air. The key was that the air had to be relatively dry. That's why they became so popular across places like Arizona, New Mexico, and other parts of the American Southwest, where evaporation happened quickly. In more humid climates, though, they weren't nearly as effective. When the air is already full of moisture, there's much less evaporation, and without evaporation, there's very little cooling. So when these bags might seem unusual today, they weren't just a clever idea. For people traveling through hot, dry country, they genuinely solved a problem. When I first picked this up, I thought I was buying an old canvas bag. Instead, I ended up learning about post war American road trips, the science of evaporative cooling, a family owned company that spent decades perfecting canvas products, and a clever little patent that solved a problem that most people today have probably never even thought about. That's one of my favorite things about collecting objects like this. The history isn't always obvious. Sometimes you have to dig for it. If you enjoyed today's episode, I really appreciate it if you'd subscribe. It helps me keep finding, researching, and sharing stories behind objects like this one. And if you, or someone in your family, ever remembers using one of these on a road trip, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.